This is a big event. It's a big video. Click that like and subscribe button first. One of them, I think, looks like a bell. I always hear people say there's a notification bell, but I never ask anybody to click it. I'm just like, if you could click subscribe and maybe a like button, maybe throw a comment, something like that. But I'm glad you're here, and because you are cordially invited to my review of You're Cordially Invited, which is now on Amazon and stars Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon, among sort of a broad cast. Supporting cast includes a whole bunch of people like Jimmy Tatro, Celia Weston, Fortune Feinster, Jack McBrayer is in here. But let's be honest, you showed up for Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon. Like, you weren't like, oh my God, what's Celia Weston doing right now? Like, everybody is there just to kind of like sweeten the cake for what is essentially a streaming movie. Although, what's really interesting about this is, and I was like, why would I do that? But I could have. I thought it was interesting. I got a screening invite, like a real physical screening invite to this, like the day of its release. So like I could have seen this in theaters if I'd wanted to see this on the big screen. And I'm like, I guess. But it's not being released theatrically. It's so interesting. It's so intriguing. So obviously they're just like projecting a digital print onto the screen that would be from at home. And I'm like, but you're not doing it really in advance. You're kind of doing it at release. So thank you, but I'm good. Anyway, this is Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon. And you can kind of know where this film is going, although it tries really hard to not be a shitty streaming movie. It's working overtime. Both Will and Reese's production companies are labeled here. He's changed his a little bit. What is it, Maria Sanchez now? Used to be Dirty Sanchez, but then he split with Adam McKay. So now he has like a new version of that, so that you can tell it. Gloria Sanchez. That's his production company. Anyway, I knew it was something like that. And then Reese's is Hello Sunshine. So they both produced this. And it's fine. They made a fine movie. I feel like there are people who are going to like angrily lament once again that all of the streaming movies are not good. And it's like, but they're fine. You know what? Like back in the day before we had streaming movies, like not every movie we went to the theaters for either was great. So we saw a lot of fine movies in theaters. I hate to just randomly pick a movie, but like No Strings Attached, I think was like a January release with Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis. It did well at the box office. It had 2 box office stars in it. The plot wasn't really anything spectacular. People kind of enjoyed it. It did okay. That's You're Cordially Invited. This isn't anything that's like, oh my God, they really just rode the stupid train down the tracks on this one. It's like, no, they just kind of saved you from like a mid-level rom-com that you might like a little bit more than some other people, but is definitely not destined to be one of the greatest rom-coms of all time. Should more films like this be released in theaters? Yeah, they should, because then we end up just sort of getting tentpoles. I think that's part of the reason why everybody went nuts for Anyone But You, is simply just because they were like, oh my God, it's going to theaters? What? We are kind of releasing too many of these types of films to theater to streaming, but this is released in the same time frame that Amazon dropped Shotgun Wedding a couple years ago, and this is definitely better than Shotgun Wedding. So Will Ferrell plays a dad who is the kind of dad Will Ferrell would play, very overly protective. He's a single father, a widower, and he has a daughter, and he's really excited to have her come home, and he's baked like a cake and some cookies, and he's just going to have the time of his life with his daughter. His daughter shows up, and lo and behold, she brought a boy home. Uh-oh. Dad does not take it well. This Will Ferrell's dad seems like the sweetest dude on the face of the planet, but also a little bit much at the same time. um, like a lot much. uh, but he has a really good relationship with his daughter, which is kind of cool. And this guy that she's marrying seems chill. Will Ferrell's just not really happy with it, though. He's not having it, but eventually he is, which because we have to advance the plot of the movie, and they want to get married where she wants to get married where her parents got married at this place. So he calls up and gets a reservation. It's a super exclusive place. It's like an island, and they can only really do one wedding a weekend. So he calls up and he's like, I don't know if you remember me, but my wife and I got married there like 30 years ago, and now we're trying to, and it's an old lady who's like, yes, I remember you. Yeah, your family. Don't worry. I don't need to take your financial information now. I'm going to put you down in the book for June 1st. And immediately after hanging up the phone, she dies. She writes down June 1st with a pen that doesn't work, and then dies. So it's like the pressure of pushing down on the paper, it comes into play later, by the way. So it is actually important. So there's nothing that's booked. Cut to family number 2. Reese Witherspoon, I don't know, works in TV, in like horrible reality television shows. And her sister comes to her, and she's ready to get married, so her big sister's there to help her, and she's getting married to Jimmy Tatro. There's some drama with that, and his family and friends, and Reese is like, no, we're gonna have the best wedding ever, and they go off and think about the same place. They're like, oh, this place looks beautiful, we're gonna do this there, and they book it. And this is after the old lady has passed, so somebody younger picks up the phone and actually does book and take the financial information. And then cut to June 1st, because I guess nobody ever needs to touch base with the actual place between then and now. I guess they just book it, and they're like, yeah, we're solid. We can just go ahead and book all the caterers and everything and whatever. So they comically both show up at the same time. Whoops-a-daisy. And Jack McBrayer is now running the place. And he essentially finds out and validates that, yes, the last, he's like, that's Will Ferrell, when did you book it? He gives him the date, and he said, that's the date she died. And they figure out by a method, I can't remember what Reese's joke is, like a Houdini method or something like that. Anyway, of seeing the imprint of her having pushed down and written his family name, and then June 1st. But Reese is like, but it's my financial information that's on the sheet. They end up finding a way to just do 2 weddings at the same time. So it's like Will and Reese are sort of at each other's throats to try to make sure that the weddings that they're in charge of are going off without a hitch, while also sort of sabotaging each other's weddings to some extent, but also then not, because obviously this movie is headed to the fact that, guess what? You know what Reese and Will are? They're both single. So, you know where this movie's headed, even though it doesn't feel like it's headed there until the end of the movie, when they're like, oh, by the way, Dad's been smiling at you the whole movie. I know that's a spoiler, but I think everybody picked up on the fact that this was going to be a Will Ferrell, Reese Witherspoon rom-com, it's so busy with so much other crap, and that it takes a while for them to get there. So it's not a traditional rom-com in a sense that you watch Will and Reese like over the course of an hour and a half or whatever, like slowly building a fondness for each other and making each other laugh and having a moment where they're like shoving cake in each other's face and they're like, oh my God, I love you. What did you say? Did you say you love me? Oh my God. No, it's not like that. It's just like at the end of the movie, they're like, by the way, Dad's been giving you googly eyes the whole weekend. So, um, yeah, it's predictable, but it's funny, and the stuff that I left out are all of the little jokes along the way, all of the shenanigans that they do. That's what makes the movie funny. When the movie is not interesting because like it becomes a Will Ferrell Reese Witherspoon comedy at the end of it, where you're like, oh, I guess they're ending up together, you know? Um, no, the movie's funny because of all of the little hijinks along the way and the things. Some of it is a stretch. Some of it is a stretch of the imagination where you have to just kind of accept certain things. Um, I love the fact that instead of trying to pretend they're anywhere else in this country, since we shoot everything in Atlanta now, they're from Atlanta. They're not even trying to hide the fact that this movie was shot in Georgia. They're just like, this movie is shot in Georgia. We're just gonna be in Georgia. We are just in Georgia. This is where this movie is. So, I thank you because Georgia doubles for pretty much every other state in the country right now. So you could have been anywhere, and you chose to actually acknowledge the fact that you were just shooting where you are. Um, it's I like it. I liked it. It's fine. It's a perfectly fine romantic comedy. It's just not. It's exactly what I said. And some of the other critics are going to come down on it and make you feel like you can't watch this because it's on streaming. And that's wrong because this is no strings attached. This is, I'm sorry, this is The Wedding Planner. This is, any sort of like mid-level romantic comedy that you kind of liked but didn't love and don't have at the top of your list. It's not the movie you put in for Valentine's Day. It's not Pretty Woman. It's not Sweet Home Alabama or I'm trying to think like what are some other ones that people really go crazy over. Sleepless in Seattle, it's not any of those movies. But yeah, it is very much no strings attached, friends with benefits. Other Reese Witherspoon movies, like Just Like Heaven, for people who like to Just Like Heaven. I mean, she's made, yeah, sure, Sweet Home Alabama blew up at the box office, but Just Like Heaven did okay. So that's where this is. It's the next tier down, but it's not in streaming hell. There are going to be worse movies this year, and I don't think we need to throw darts at every single one of them. Now, the audio description track did let me down a couple places. There was one scene specifically where Reese and her crew are in a room talking, and they're talking sort of negatively about Will and his family. And Will is outside, although you wouldn't know it. And it seems like that scene is set up so that we're supposed to be seeing his reaction to like what's going on. The scene sets it up poorly, and then we don't really get a reaction until he like storms off at the end. It's not really clear what's going on, even though it seems like we keep cutting. And the way that I picked up on what it is that we're doing is because the sound changes from like clear to muffled, like you're listening to something through a door or through a wall. And it isn't until that scene finishes where you get sort of any sort of idea of what you were just watching. Whereas it would have been nice to know sort of towards the beginning what that was. So that was just sort of like one of the things. Or you're also going to have to take like giant leaps. Like Jimmy Tatro does like a blood transfusion out of nowhere. He's just like, I can do this. I'm like, how? With what? I mean, he just straight up does a blood transfusion without ever needing to take anybody to the hospital, and nobody asks any questions, and that's just how the movie rolls. They're just like, yep. Sometimes the movie chooses something that's really silly or stupid and then doesn't like answer like the it's like people know it's dumb in the movie and then they address it. They're like, wait a minute, what? There's a time when uh all of Reese's crew, like everybody drives like white Suburbans. And he's like, how do you tell them apart? And nobody actually answers the question. And I was thinking, neither did the audio description. I was like, did they ever? I was expecting like with vanity plates, you know what I'm saying? Like that they all had vanity plates that said whose was what car. So like they're all technically the same car, but their plate all says something different. But that was, if that is what it is, because that's how I would have written that joke, is because it shows the cars driving away. Um, that was left out of the audio description. So some of the things, it's like, I don't even know if they're, if I don't know if the joke just was not well described. So, or if the joke just is poorly written, you know, like, because he sets up the question, but it's never answered. And it feels like the kind of thing, like, if you're going to address the fact that everybody's driving a white Suburban, then have an answer for it. Finish the joke. Like, how do they tell it apart? And, I'm going to guess it was a visual cue that just didn't make it in the audio description. So it's not the most overwhelming audio description track of the year. I'm also assuming everyone's white. I didn't really get a whole lot of description, and every single cast member that I know, that I visually know what they look like, is white. So I'm just thinking it's a lot of white people. I mean, if there's diversity in here, it's in like the supporting cast somewhere. It's like a best friend or a bridesmaid or something like that, because I don't know everybody else's. So I like Reese Witherspoon's white, so I would assume her sister is, unless she has, because I don't think they ever use the term half sister. So, and Jimmy Tatro is, so I just, maybe the film was just white. That's why there wasn't really a depth of description in terms of like ethnicity of these people. Jack McBrayer, Fortune Feimster, you know what I'm saying? Like all these people, it's possible that this is just like the whitest movie of the year. um, yeah, but I liked it enough. But no, this is not going to be on like my top 10 of the year. I see sort of, I subscribe to like over 300 people who do what I do, but they're all cited. And I feel like people are going to come down on this movie and be like, streaming is killing film. There's nothing that's wrong with this movie. This movie could be released theatrically and you would give it a higher grade because you wouldn't have known it was a streaming movie. Don't play. So I think there are people out there that handicap movies immediately because they premiere on a streaming service. And that's not really fair, because not everybody can control where their movies go. Although you would think Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon were exactly the kind of talent that could have writers in a clause that require a movie to premiere theatrically, like Juror Number 2 obviously did, which is why it premiered in 50 screens, because somebody, probably Clint Eastwood, had a theatrical clause in that contract. Anyway, I'm going to give You're Cordially Invited a B. I think it's perfectly fine, and I'm not going to hate that grade later on in the year. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys on the other side.